Hey, everybody. Welcome. I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. You are here for creating compelling characters, and the goal is to create characters that will stick with readers and viewers long after the story ends. I'm thrilled that you're here. While we're waiting for people to join us, I would love it if you could answer a few questions for me in the comments or in the chat area. First, where are you from? Second, are you writing a screenplay or a novel? And third, what is the genre? And as we kind of wait for people to come in, I'll just wait for you guys to give me some, already popping up. We'll kind of share a few. Welcome, Savannah, Georgia, writing a sci-fi novel. That's awesome. I wish I could write sci-fi. Oh, and then I guess not too far from you, Atlanta, Georgia, a young adult novel. I'm a young adult author, so you're a person after my own heart. Paris, Texas, an erotica novel. Awesome. You must live quite an interesting life. That's pretty cool. Orlando, historical romance. I'm assuming that's a novel. Los Angeles, a rom-com script. Well, that's exciting. I don't think we have enough rom-coms in the world. Let me see. Kearney, Nebraska, Christian fiction novel, maybe. And then Sacramento, horror script. I do find horror scripts very interesting. I used to do coverage for a director that did small budgets horror films. And so he would send me a couple of scripts every week and I'd read them and give him notes on what I thought about them and if I thought they were interesting or if the audience would find them interesting. And they freaked me clean out. So I have a whole lot of respect for anybody that can come up with that and who isn't completely demented, because some of that stuff's freaky. But okay, so it looks like we've got most the people here that we got a good number here. So great. I'll just keep right on going. We will have questions at the end of this workshop. So as we're going, I ask that you kind of hold off on typing the questions in here right now, just because I'm the only person here. I'm a one-person show and I can't really do the slides and talk and look at questions at the same time. So if you will hold off on your questions until the very end during the question time, that would really be helpful for me. Just because I get really easily distracted and I'll chase 24 rabbits if you guys start throwing me questions now. So just hold off until the very, very end, and then I'll be sure to answer as many questions as I can. So block out everything else for the next 30 to 45 minutes. And we're going to get right to this. So I really appreciate the fact that you're here and you're taking time away from your writing or your family and your friends or that job that you snuck away from in order to sit here for a half an hour or so, maybe a little more. So here's what we're going to be doing and what you're going to be discovering while you're on this workshop. First, how you can create protagonists and antagonists without spending days and days in character inspiration purgatory. We've all been there. I know I've been there. It sucks, and it sucks big time. So we're going to really be concentrating on that. Second, how you can increase character depth without getting overwhelmed or lost in the process. Okay, and if you hear that clicking noise, I'm sorry. I had a pen in my hand and I'm clicking the lid, so I apologize. But it's live, right? So that's what happens. So no more getting lost is our second goal. Then third, the 3 keys to a killer backstory. So this will give you some insight as to how we kind of create backstory and what really are the necessities for that. And then fourth, how you can create a protagonist that will stand out from other characters that fill bookstore shelves, movie theaters, online streaming world. There's a lot of competition out there. But compelling characters can help your stories gain attention. So that's what we're here to do, whether it's gain the attention of your readers or even first gain the attention of your wannabe agent, somebody you want to get as an agent, or producers if you're a screenwriter. So you got to get everybody's attention from the very beginning, and that's what we're here to do. So my promise to you is a step-by-step strategy for creating compelling characters without chaining yourself to your desk or to the internet while you're neglecting your relationships that make life a lot more satisfying. And actually, because life is more satisfying, it can make writing more fun. That's my goal, to always help you make writing fun rather than a chore. So let's face it, spending time with our loved ones and getting out in the world is what brings about story and character ideas. But if we're actually stuck behind the computer all the time, inspiration will never come, right? We're just going to be sitting there and we're not going to be out exploring anything or doing anything. But I'm showing you right now, this is my family, or at least most of them. These are the people that I want to get out from under the desk so that I can spend time with, especially as they're growing older. Those are my boys. Caleb is to the left. He's now a freshman at the University of Oklahoma. And then I have Jacob behind him. He's my oldest, and he's at the University of Central Oklahoma. He's a sophomore. And then there on the right is my youngest, Johannes, and he is a junior in high school, which is completely depressing. I mean, so time is slipping away, and I want to be able to spend more time with them and not like in the nightmare phase of planning my books and stuff. And then there in the left-hand corner on the bottom is my mom and I. We were in Nantucket together. I filmed a film there, and then I got to go back for the Nantucket Film Festival and speak on one of their writers' panels. And so I got to take my mom with me, and it was a great trip, and she just loved every second of it. And then there I am hanging out in my office. The only picture I don't have is a picture of my husband. He's not real thrilled to get his picture taken. But Sean and I have been married for like 22 years now. So we've gone the long distance, and he's put up with my writing and really supports me and enjoys it, and actually reads my stuff now, which is nice of him to do. Sometimes that takes time, as you guys know. Some of our spouses don't get as excited about it as we wish they would. So let me ask you a few questions, and please type in the comments a yes or a no. The first question is, do you have a killer story idea that you know could become a bestseller or maybe even a top grossing film, but the problem is you get stuck with writer's block or a feeling of being overwhelmed by the process and not even knowing where to start? I mean, that's where I kind of started out. I always have story ideas. I never lack story ideas, but it's getting started and getting over that feeling of being overwhelmed. That's the hardest part for me. Or what about, do you want to create characters that inspire you? Oh, I'm seeing all kinds of yeses already. Oh, good. The second question, do you want to create characters that inspire you, that cause you to swoon and make the writing process much easier and much more interesting? Yes, getting yeses on that one. Are you tired of feeling stuck with your story, or are you working way too hard for only a few chapters and characters that just don't seem that interesting or that don't move your story forward? Yeah, okay, more yeses, that's good. God, isn't it horrible? There's nothing worse than that stuck feeling. And then last, are you struggling to break free from the creating phase and to see that you can move into the actual writing phase? I mean, yeah, I mean, we all can get kind of stuck and then we call it procrastination, but really it is just sort of being overwhelmed, and we feel like we have to do all this planning and all this planning, and that ends up taking so much time we never actually get focused on writing. So based on all of your yeses, then I'm not alone. That's good that I got some yeses and some absolutes, I'm sure, and there's maybe even some preach it's in there, like, preach it, girl, amen, sister. I mean, we're all kind of in the same boat, right? God, just getting stuck in that writer's block and feeling overwhelmed is just common. I know that because I work with a lot of writers. I've talked to a lot of people, and this is just the reality sometimes of the writing process. So most of what writers can learn about character development is in a million pieces of information, and it's spread all around the internet. Or I guess you could go take a college class, but really, who has the money for that, and who has the time for that? You know, a lot of us we have jobs, we need income, and writing isn't supporting us right now, or in the, and it takes a while to get to the point where writing can even ever sustain an income enough for you to live off of. So it's not like you just have tons and tons of money to throw at trying to learn all this. Lucky for you, I've done that. So a lot of what I've spent a lot of my money on, I'm going to give you here. But just getting all that information is difficult and it's expensive. And it just adds to the nightmare. So the problem really isn't that you don't have the story ideas or the character concepts. The problem is learning how to expand our ideas so that we can create characters and a story that readers can't put down or viewers can't look away from if you're writing a screenplay. What you're missing are the systems that make the writing process more fun and more successful without spinning your wheels or wasting your time. I mean, does this picture look at all familiar? I mean, that looks like me. I mean, other than that, it's a man, and obviously he needs to shave. Of course, I probably need to shave too, but it's more my legs than my beard. Hopefully, hopefully anyway. But that looks like me. It just gets to be too much. And sometimes that lack of inspiration and direction can lead to a crisis of self-esteem. And when we have a crisis of self-esteem, it's the worst thing that can happen to us, because then that's when the real writer's block comes and we literally just get locked up. But there is one thing that you need to know, and that is that successful writers understand their characters, and they create characters that will inspire them and want them to keep writing. So they want you to keep writing so we can figure out what our characters are going to do. There's nothing as awesome as that moment where you fall in love with your characters and you absolutely cannot wait to see what's going to happen to them. And that's what I want for you, because that's what makes this process so fun and so rewarding. But let's face it, I mean, if you're not excited about your characters, your readers or your viewers certainly will not be. And boring and one-dimensional characters are the nail in the coffin of any story. I mean, boring characters, a producer, a director isn't going to make it past the first page of your script. And a reader of your novel isn't going to make it past the first couple of pages. They can tell if it's going to be boring. They can tell if your character lacks depth very, very quickly. Our readers are smart. They've read a lot or they've watched a lot. And so they know when they see a good character and when they don't. Now, if you're like most writers, you know that your story ideas deserve greater recognition. But unfortunately, your current writing systems just don't help you get the story written. But thankfully, hopefully, that problem has been solved, or at least I have found one way to solve that problem. For those of you that don't know, my name is Stephanie Miller. I am a screenwriter, a script and story consultant, a writing coach and counselor, and an author. So I'm a busy girl, but I love everything that I do. As a screenwriter, my projects include the recently released film Annabelle Hooper and the Ghost of Nantucket. And I have 2 films that are currently in development as well. And then as a script and story consultant, I work with authors and screenwriters and producers and directors to fully conceptualize their stories and discover kind of the best ways to present them to the world. And maybe just make some alterations, say, you're kind of missing this, or these things don't connect, or what have you. And the goal is always just to find the best possible story. I'm also an author. I actually have 3 self-published novels. That's how I started in this industry. I just pushed my way through and self-published my novels. And then I also have a brand new novel, which is going to be released in January of 2018 by a mainstream traditional publisher. So I'm excited about that. And I'm also a writing coach and a counselor. Because just 2 years ago, I was in the middle of graduate school. I was working on receiving my master's degree in counseling. I had just started my internship, ready to start seeing clients, and then I got a phone call. And that phone call was an invitation to rewrite a script. It was the Annabelle Hooper and the Ghost of Nantucket. I was asked to rewrite it, and then also asked to join them during the shoot in Nantucket, Massachusetts. I mean, are you kidding me? Nantucket, Massachusetts, like someplace I'd always wanted to go, and I got to go. So it was like a dream come true for me. This was my shot to live my dream of writing full time. So I stepped out of graduate school, and quite honestly, I haven't been back and I haven't looked back. I have loved this journey so far over the last 2 years. And so I've now worked on several film projects, and I have other projects in development, but I still get to enjoy my other love of counseling. And I do that by working with writers and kind of helping them through the trials and tribulations of writing and publishing in the film world, which there are a lot of trials and tribulations. It is an ugly world out there. We all know that. And I'm telling you, the publishing and entertainment business are no different. There could be real sharks out there, but there can also be some really great people. It's just a matter of kind of persevering. So really, my specialty is helping writers find inspiration and energy for their stories by providing them systems that lead to a faster, more in-depth, and more interesting story and character development, while at the same time kind of providing the mental and the emotional and even sometimes spiritual assistance they need to survive the process. Because my goal for myself and my goal for you, all of you and my clients, is that you get up from the desk each day unscathed, right? I mean, yes, you should kind of leave yourself in your story and kind of bleed, quote unquote, on the page. But we don't want that physically, obviously, and we don't want the process to feel like we're getting our wisdom teeth pulled. We want to actually be able to enjoy it. So I have a confession of my own. I mean, I struggled with all of that stuff. That's why I just said it all. That was really my story for the majority of my, 6 going on 7 years now in this whole kind of writing world. I had big plans and I had dreams and I had tons and tons of story ideas and Pinterest boards coming out the wazoo, so I could collect all of my ideas. And I really believed that they were going to work out and that things were going to be awesome. I mean, I had talent. I believed I had talent, and I believed that someone would find me. And I believed that my stories would come to life and that everyone would love them. I mean, why wouldn't they, right? I mean, why wouldn't they love your stories? It's not that people won't love them. The problem is getting them to them, right? So in my mind, I was going to experience my books on being on bookstore shelves and my scripts coming to life on the big screen. And I did make some progress, but I would continually get stuck in that whole writer's purgatory place. I mean, that place where you end up with when nothing seems to be working and our characters have lost their spark and our story is dead in the water and we're left scratching our head wondering, okay, what do I do next? Where do I take this character next? And therefore we get stuck and we get writer's block. So I didn't progress as quickly as I wanted. And when I did finish a story, it felt like I'd been through the ringer. I mean, I just felt like I needed to be wrung out. I mean, exhausted, emotionally drained, and my self-esteem a lot of times just kind of plummeted. I mean, yes, stories should drain us of emotions. Like I said, we should leave a big part of ourselves on each and every page, but we shouldn't be miserable. And we shouldn't feel horrible about ourselves in the process. I mean, why would you want to write if that's how it's going to be, right? The end result for me was that I was frustrated and I was overwhelmed and I started getting discouraged. And I spent so much time and energy on writing the books and writing the scripts that I couldn't even think. I mean, oh my God, I couldn't even think about the next step, which was getting it out to the world. And quite realistically and honestly, getting it out in the world and actually giving birth to it and pushing it out there is the hardest part. I mean, it's the most difficult part. I mean, if oh my geez, that's a whole nother webinar. Writing isn't the hardest part. It can be the most emotionally draining, but it's not physically necessarily the hardest part. So the turning point for me was that I decided to learn from other successful writers in the world. Like I stopped doing what I was doing. I stopped writing and I just kind of dove into trying to figure out how I could make this work. So I did. I studied other successful writers. I bought tons of systems. I bought tons of books and research. I decided to create real systems that would make each step of the process easier. So I took all the information that I had bought and compiled, probably literally thousands of dollars, and no, I don't even want to think about how much time. I compiled a lot of it. Then I also used my own knowledge from counseling, from learning about counseling and psychology, and I put all that together and I created systems for myself. And then I promised myself that I absolutely would not quit until I saw the results that I wanted and the results that I could be excited about. And that was kind of a major milestone for me. It was a shift in the way I thought. It was a shift in my writing. And what actually ended up happening was really kind of unexpected for me. And that was my writing life really did change forever. My dream came true. My stress level dropped. My self-esteem rose. My writing speed increased. My writer's block decreased immensely, which was an answer to prayer. And the love for my stories and the characters I created grew, and it grew exponentially. So only after all that did I finally have the opportunity to work with the producers and the directors and get them to see my scripts and then actually see scripts come to life, and now work with a traditional publisher and to see my novel on a bookstore shelves one day. And really, we already have a film based on that novel in development right now, and an actress is already attached. So it's just been crazy, but it was getting everything kind of ready, and putting the systems in place. And so what I learned was that the only pathway to lasting writing success is to stop doing too much stuff and start doing the right stuff. Like, we spend so much time doing things that really, when it boils right down to it, just aren't really going to benefit us, and they're not going to help our story. So it's all about doing the correct stuff, the right stuff, so that we can continue moving on with our story development. So what I did was I created easy systems that will boost your self-esteem and get you excited about writing. So I want to help you get your story told, and it all starts with immersing yourself and story prep immersion. Not being prepared to tell your story is basically like, it's like getting in a car for a long, long road trip, and you don't have any gas, you don't have any puffy Cheetos or moon pies or whatever, no snacks, no directions, and your GPS is broken. Like, you literally will not get very far because you don't even know where you're going. You have no idea. So story prep is vital. And at the end of this workshop, I'm going to give you the complimentary access to my 6-day story prep. I'm going to give it to you free because I feel like you have to have a strong foundation to base your novel on. But today in this particular workshop, we're going to focus on character, telling characters that live on long after the book is put back on the shelf or the movie ends. So let's get right to that. Notes. I'm going to give you a lot of information. Okay. A lot of information. I really wanted to make sure that you could walk away from this workshop ready to get some stuff done. So just know you don't have to be able to write it all down right now. I am offering a replay of this for the next 48 hours. So you can refer back to it and watch it again, and just make sure that you've got it all down. Okay. So the question is, first question was, how do you create compelling protagonists and antagonists without spending days in character development purgatory? So my first piece of advice for you is organized chaos. Okay. That's right. I mean, it's kind of an easy, simple, maybe concept, and maybe for some of you that are control freaks, this really does freak you out. But controlled chaos. Here's what I want. I want you to be organized enough to keep your ideas at your fingertips. Okay. But at the same time, I want to provide you with the freedom to brainstorm and place no limits on yourself or your ideas. At this stage in character development, there are no bad ideas. Okay. Do you hear that? There are no bad ideas. Anything and anyone is possible. So don't rule anything out. Now, personally, in this organized chaos phase, I use sticky notes. I use colored sticky notes. Each of my main characters gets their own color. I do talk about this a lot in the 6-day story prep immersion, so you'll be able to see that after this. I talk about my process, but so I have the sticky notes, and I write anything and everything that comes to mind about my characters, and I put one idea per sticky note. Okay, so if that's names, occupations, how they dress, their quirks, songs that might remind me of them, their goals, their motivations, lines or dialogue that I kind of imagine them speaking, all of that stuff, anything goes on sticky notes. Anything. So because sticky notes are easy to kind of move around. So right now they go on a window in my study, and they all just line that window. We can barely even see out of it. And then when I'm ready, then I move into the next phase, which is my 21-day beat by beat challenge, where I literally plot my entire novel or screenplay, depending on what I'm working on. And those sticky notes come off of the window and they go in that template. And I'll talk about that template a little bit later. But just for the record, if a sticky note ends up not coming off that window, in other words, you're not going to use it in a story, don't throw it away. Okay. That idea could be brilliant. It just needs to wait maybe for a different story. So don't ever throw an idea away. So first, organized chaos. Give yourself the right to just be free and just write whatever comes to mind. That's what's fun about writing. Okay. Then step 2, or my second piece of advice for you, is keep it a secret. Okay. don't share your project or your ideas or your characters with other people. It's too new and you will be too easily discouraged and you'll be let off the path and you'll be defeated or you'll be swayed in a particular way to go with your characters. So just don't do it. Very rarely does anything positive come from sharing a story idea or character ideas too soon. I mean, I get it. You're excited about your projects. I get excited about my projects, and you think it's the best idea you've ever had. And it may very well be, which is another reason why you don't want to be going out and sharing it with the world. But there are always going to be doubters. Always, always, always doubters. A lot of times they're the people closest to you in your life. I have encountered that myself. That's a whole nother thing. And that's actually for, I do a lot of that when I speak with my writers. It's just that devastation of not having support and they having all the doubters. But anyway, so there's going to always be doubters. There are going to always be haters. Always, always, always. And there's always going to be critics. There will always be there in every single phase of writing. So why bring them in at this point, this early, right? You have plenty of time for that later on. You'll have a thicker skin for that later on. And truth be told, what's most exciting about your new story and your characters right now are going to become the very things that later on you might get stumped on. And so any of the negativity that kind of came your way when you were sharing that idea, it's going to haunt you. It's going to haunt you in those moments where you're stuck. So just don't do it. Okay. It'll confuse you. It will depress you. It will discourage you. So just don't do it. I mean, if you absolutely need to kind of talk about your idea, run it past someone and see if it's any good. I mean, go in there. I'll give you the link on the email that I send you after this webinar. Contact me, schedule a free 20-minute strategy call, or schedule a whole, coaching session. I don't care. We can talk through your ideas and I can brainstorm with you and I can maybe point you in different directions, but I won't be discouraging to you. And I'll give you hope and actually help you hopefully get excited. So just keep it a secret. Okay. Most people don't understand what's going on in our heads as writers, or what we're trying to accomplish. And since they don't get to hear about it, at least not at this point. Okay. Fair enough. I know that's kind of tough, but trust me, I've learned the hard way. So the third thing is creating the basics. So who is this person that you're creating? And those basics include, first, you need to obviously have a character name for them. I mean, you can choose very simple names, but the question, maybe you choose names that have some meaning behind them, a story behind it. For me, for example, when I wrote my first novel, Salvaged, the main character, Addie, her real name was Atticus, because my favorite movie and my favorite book is To Kill a Mockingbird. And so that was kind of my homage to Addie. And that also became part of the backstory for her character. So first, give them a name. Second, give them a close circle of friends. Okay, they're going to have some people they can bounce stuff off of. You don't have to have these friends completely figured out right now and developed, but just know that you're going to have them. You need to give them a goal, the main character a goal, an overall goal. Okay, we're not going to look at little goals right now. We'll do that later when we do the plotting part of your story. Right now, we just need, what's the overall goal here? What are they trying to accomplish? Okay, you have to have a goal, and if you're going to have a story. And then we need to know, we want you to give them a motivation. Why are they doing what they're doing, right? Their why is what's going to compel them when times get tough. So that's why you have to know their motivation. Then you're going to give them an obstacle, because without obstacles, you have no story. Then you want to give them that goes along with obstacles. You need to give them an antagonist. Okay. And then remember, always keep in mind that your antagonist in his own mind or her own mind is the protagonist. So they need to have, your main character will be their antagonist. So make sure you look at it that way too. And again, this antagonist at this point does not have to be fully formed. You will go through this whole process for them too. But for right now, you just need to know there will be an antagonist and have a general idea of who they are or what they are. They don't even have to be a person. Then you're going to give them a purpose. Okay, just like us in the real world, we all need a purpose. And again, your purpose is what's going to help them stay on course when stuff gets rough. And then you want to give them a history. The goal of having a history is that they will come back. That history is going to actually come back to bite them in the butt during the story. Okay. The they're going to have to face that history in order to move forward. So that's kind of one of the ways you use that. And those are the basics. So again, I cover more of that in the 6-day story prep immersion, which we'll get later, and in the beat by beat challenge. But that's kind of the basics for right now. Then we move on to the 3 keys to a killer backstory. And I lovingly refer to these as my 3 Fs, F as in Frank, because we have to continually throw obstacles in the way of our protagonists, okay? And we don't know what their obstacles will be until we know these 3 Fs. And those 3 Fs are their fears, their flaws, and their failures. So first, let's look at their fears. The reality of it is we all fear something, but it's best if your character fears the very things that they're going to have to confront in order to overcome their obstacles, right? So they can be little fears like Indiana Jones and snakes, or they can be big fears, like maybe huge psychological problems or issues, and that, you know, they have developed big fears. And I can relate to Indiana Jones because snakes are my big fears. It's my big fear. Snakes closely followed by porta potties. So weird. But anyway, when we are afraid, we act in ways that we never would otherwise. We say things that we'd never say because we're uninhibited. So who is your character when they're not putting that mask on? Who is the character when they're not thinking about how they should be acting, when they're at their most real, they're at their rawest moment? Who is that person when they don't have time to put that mask on? So that's when their fears are shown. Then you want to create their flaws, because nothing, trust me guys, you know this, nothing is more boring than a perfect character. I mean, talk about snooze fest. If you ever watch something and every character like doesn't do anything wrong, it's like, oh, you can't turn it off or put the book down fast enough. Your characters have to have flaws. So the flaws will be improved upon through the story arc, hopefully, but they have to at least start with them, and they need to end with them. They just need to be lesser flaws. The flaws need to limit a character's progress until they finally come to terms with what those flaws are and how they affect them. So you need to identify them and improve upon them and move forward. Just like in the real world, right? Our flaws limit us and even set us back in life. So it should be no different for our characters, because again, our goal is to create very realistic characters. So let me give you an example. Like, let's say you've got a character with a really bad temper and he's continually getting in trouble and he keeps delaying his quest and being successful until he can finally learn how to control his temper. Okay, there's just one example. Or let's say there's a girl with severe anxiety and she's continually placed in situations where her anxiety is triggered. So she's got to learn how to manage it or defeat it. I mean, you can have her accept herself as she is. I mean, it's just who she is, and she just learns how to cope and keeps moving forward. That's a way to do it too. I mean, you don't have to have it to where, oh, I'm going to completely conquer every single thing, right? Part of sometimes our journey is just accepting who we are as we are. So that's a flaw. Okay, let me take a drink. Hold on one second. Okay, sorry about that. So those are the three three things that we have to have for our characters. They have to start somewhere. They have to start with flaws. At least those are the first two, fears and flaws. And so then we go to the third thing, and that is failures. A fear of failure is a big one for everybody. We all fear failure. That's hard to say. We all fear failure. And really nobody wants to fail at the same thing more than once. Like, we're hoping that we only have to learn our lesson one time. So if we know what our characters' failures are, we can continually keep them the possibility of them repeating their failure again. So it's going to require them to grow, and it's going to require them to change. So and kind of continually throwing those failures in their face is going to continue to bring angst and drama and tension. And that's a necessary part of our story. So, I mean, here's why all that's really important. The 3 Fs also make our characters more relatable, more likable, and more sympathetic. We will root for them if we feel like we get them. So even if they're not living in our galaxy, I mean, look at Star Wars, for example. I mean, I will never be Harrison Ford with a Chewbacca, although I wish I did have a Chewbacca, but I never will. But I can still relate to who he is, because I've seen that before. And maybe in some way I am partly Han Solo, which shouldn't we all be? So you want your readers and your viewers to root for your characters. And in order to do that, they have to identify with them to a certain extent. And you do that by crafting memorable characters with very interesting backstory. So, I mean, those are some of the basics, the basics of creating characters. So when you're going to sit down, you take all that into account and you throw all that around, and then you start creating them. But I also promised you a step-by-step strategy to create compelling characters. And so here it is. It is my 7 layers of character creation. And those 7 layers are: 1, broad character temperaments. Number 2 is detailed character personality types. Number 3 are archetypes. Number 4 is discovering the archetypal journey. Number 5 is revealing defense mechanisms. Number 6 is unveiling possible psychological disorders. And number 7 is finally getting to write the dialogue. So if you're like most of the writers that I talk to, or even myself originally, you want to get straight to writing the dialogue. You want to get straight to layer 7 because that's the exciting part. It's the fun part. It's where things get really interesting. But quite honestly, like, I don't think that you can truly write good dialogue without the previous 6 steps, the previous 6 layers. Because if you don't know all that stuff about them, how do you know how they talk? I mean, how do you know what they'd even say in given situations if you don't know who they are? Why do they say the things they say? Do they have catchphrases? Do they, I don't know, do they cuss like a sailor? I mean, if they do, why do they cuss like a sailor? Or if they don't, if they refuse to cuss, why don't they cuss? Like, who doesn't cuss, right? There's got to be a reason for it. Is there a rhythm to the way they talk? Are they long talkers? Or do they use like really short, crisp sentences? Is your character really, are they really introverted? If they're really introverted, they're probably going to have the least amount of dialogue in a book or in a screenplay. So you have to know all that before you can sit down and start writing what they're going to say to the world, because you don't even know who they are in the world yet, right? So for example, let's say you have a character who has a more analytical temperament. That person isn't going to use flowery language. They're not going to be really outgoing when they talk. They're going to be really direct. They're going to get to the point. They're going to use facts and numbers. They're not going to talk in hypotheticals, right? But if you were to compare that to someone who, let's say, is more outgoing and more sociable in their temperament, they're going to talk a lot like I do. They're going to use run-on sentences like I do. They're going to talk fast like I do, as I'm sure you can tell. And they're going to talk about the latest and the greatest, and they're going to use more dramatic terminology. So you have to know that before you're going to sit down and write that character's dialogue. So you won't know how to write their dialogue until you know the 7 layers or the 6 previous layers. So you have to know them inside and out. So let's go through that process. Let's start right now. First is their broad personality type and their temperaments. So a temperament is the core of who we are. And it is the core of who your character will be. We're born that way. It's in our genes. We can't really change it. Okay, it's who we are. Our character is who we are when nobody's looking. We hear that all the time, right? And then our personality is who we portray ourselves to be around other people. So our personality is the mask we wear. So in character development, it's important to know all of them, obviously, but what we're looking for is we want to focus more on our temperaments, like who we are at the root, or who the character is at the root of themselves. Because when we put our characters under pressure, which is what we're supposed to do, right? As writers, we're supposed to put them in a constant state of pressure so that they'll always find themselves kind of in a mess. And we can see how they truly are. Okay, so we need to know where where they fall sort of on the temperament scale, so we know how they react at their worst and weakest moments. So let's see. For example, are they a more dominant personality type, or are they more submissive? Okay, do they kind of let other people take the lead, or are they always the ones that take the lead? So if you have, for example, a more submissive protagonist, you're going to have to be more creative with how you propel that story forward, because by nature, a more submissive personality type doesn't really propel much of anything, right? I mean, they're more of a steady kind of, they just take things as they come. They don't make things happen per se. So you're going to have to get creative with that. Whereas if maybe you use a more dominant personality, they tend to make things happen. They act, right? So they can start propelling a story forward. So those are one thing. Those are some things to think about. How about, is your character self-confident, right? If they have a lot of self-confidence, how are you going to destroy that self-confidence? I mean, at least for a period of time. What obstacles are you going to use that you put in their place to reduce that self-confidence and kind of knock that edge off a little bit? Or on the other hand, what if you've got somebody who has really low self-esteem? What obstacles are you going to put in their place to kind of raise their self-esteem so they can kind of believe in themselves and realize, oh my gosh, I can accomplish this. I can reach my goal here. Let's see. What about, are they detail oriented, or do they ignore details altogether? Are they planners, or are they pantsers? Are they creative, or are they analytical? Are they excitable, or are they steady and stable? So characters that are born leaders aren't necessarily going to be looking for a situation to lead in. They just, by nature, they get in a situation and they take over. So those are the kind of things that you look at when you're looking at their broad personality types. And those are just some of the options, of course. I don't have all day, but to explain them all to you. But that's just some of them that you can choose from. Then you move to your second layer, which is a more detailed and in-depth personality and temperament. And this is really in-depth, so we don't have really a lot of time to go into it today. So I'll just basically hint at some stuff here. It's the Myers-Briggs is one of the ways that you do that. So are they introverted or extroverted? Are they sensory or intuitive? Are they feelers or are they thinkers? Are they perceivers or are they judgers? Now that might sound like French to you. I don't know. But trust me, you'll learn all about it. So the thing that's really interesting about Myers-Briggs is you take all those different aspects, you throw them all together, you mix them all up. And the more you mix them up, of course, you get different personality and temperaments. The more you know about that, the better off you're going to be, because you're going to be able to see how your character is going to respond in a multitude of situations, and just who they are at the core. So it's really important to know their in-depth personality. And then the next step is your archetypes. And archetypes have been around for centuries. They're used in all types of storytelling. The classics include the hero or the maiden or the mentor or the wizard, or the evil figure, what have you. Then there's newer versions. So you have maybe the geek, the fashionista, the princess, the athlete. I always picture basically Breakfast Club, John Hughes' Breakfast Club. I mean, that was stereotypes. I mean, yes, they were cliches to a certain extent, but they were basically archetypes. And knowing archetypes, trust me, make this writing process a lot easier. So you can also combine archetypes to give them more depth. So maybe it's an alter ego, or maybe it's a shadow, or maybe it's even, a way to kind of give them more positive qualities. So maybe you have a rebel who really kind of takes that rebel role, but at the same time, they're also a caregiver, right? Like maybe they have their mom at home who can't take care of herself. And so when you least expect this rebel to, he or she actually becomes this very nurturing person. Okay, so that's an example of how you can kind of take archetypes and combine them to really kind of make your character stronger. But one of the distinctions you want to make is that an archetype is who we are at our core, right? So that's like our temperament. And then our stereotype is more like the personality. It's who we show ourselves to be. So the stereotype is who we kind of become in order to fit in with society and find our place. But really the archetype is who we are deep down inside. And it's no different for your characters. So all of those questions right there are going to give your characters some more depth. And then that also leads us to the next step, which is the journey. It's the archetypal journey, because certain archetypes follow certain journeys. We're familiar with them as an audience, and we understand kind of where they're at. But then we as writers get to put a twist on that. So it isn't just we've seen this 100 times before. It's just a new way to take a journey and make it interesting. So for example, are you going to have a protagonist who is special in some way? Do they have a special gift? Do they have magical powers? And if they do, then more than likely when you set them on their archetypal journey, it's going to include maybe a wizard or a guide of some sort. Again, Luke Skywalker, right? He had a special gift, and he had Obi-Wan Kenobi. Or if you're Harry Potter, you have Gandalf. Oh gosh, I can't think of his name. Is it Gandalf or is that something else? Or Gandalf might be Lord of the Rings. Okay, I'm getting all my wizards confused, but you know exactly what I'm saying. So there's always a guide or a mentor in the archetypal journey of someone with a special gift or a special power. So do you see? You start figuring out how all the pieces go together. It's so exciting. Oh my gosh, because it helps so much. And if you have that, let's say you have that character that has a special gift. Is it like in a kingdom that he or she is trying to save, or the whole world, or a whole galaxy? Or is this really just kind of their own personal fight? It can be all of those things. So when we start learning about archetypes and then we start learning about their journeys, we're really doing two things at once. We're creating a character, but we're also now starting to plot what this character is going to do. And it just starts getting so exciting. So archetypal journey is one of my favorite parts. Okay, then we have layer 5, and layer 5 is defense mechanisms. When you might be like, what the hell, defense mechanisms, what? But here's the thing. Our goal as writers is to put characters into situations they have to overcome, right? And when we're first faced with adversity, what's our natural response going to be? What's your character's natural response going to be when you put them in a bad place? Are they going to go into denial? Are they going to lash out? Are they going to use humor to cover it? Are they going to regress back to kind of childhood behaviors or childish behaviors? Do they suck on their thumb? Do they twist their hair? Are they going to overindulge, in kind of some acceptable things in order to kind of overcome it or not think about it? Are they going to repress memories and moments? And so they really have no recollection of that harmful thing. We have so many different defense mechanisms that are going to make our characters really interesting, a lot more understandable and relatable, because each personality and each temperament has a tendency to defend themselves in a particular way. So, for example, introverts, when they want to defend themselves emotionally, the first thing they're going to do is they are going to retreat and they are going to withdraw from society. Okay, almost every single kind of introverted type personality is going to do that. And then from there, from that place of seclusion, they can often enter a place of denial and then a place of depression, or both. Okay, very typical for introverts. On the other hand, if you have a character who we've distinguished that they've got more of an outgoing personality, then when they want to defend themselves emotionally, they don't want to think about something, they're going to go exterior, right? They're going to go hang out with all their friends. They're going to get themselves involved in as much stuff as they can to kind of get their mind off it. And they're going to get hyper-focused on having fun, which would lead to overindulgence and addiction if they're not careful. So do you see that kind of pattern that starts? It's very common for the extroverts. So it's understanding how each of these pieces fit together that not only help you create believable characters, but they also create the obstacles and the possible things and the ways that they can grow. So by figuring all that out, we go, you know what, it'd be really interesting to put them against this kind of obstacle because it's going to require such and such of them. And that's how that works. And in their weakest moments, how do they psychologically protect themselves? Which then can also lead to the next layer, which is the psychological disorders. So do they have any? Okay. Do they, or a family member or another character in the story, do they have one? If so, what does it look like? How do they present themselves? Um, how does the disorder reveal itself to other people, or does it? Is it hidden? Is it diagnosed? Do they see a counselor? What's the counselor's plan to help them? Can they help them? For example, I mean, if they're narcissistic, they've got narcissistic personality disorder. There's no help for that. There's nothing that can cure that. You kind of need to know that going into writing a story. If you're going to have a really narcissistic personality, there's not going to be much of a character arc for them. They're not going to be able to change. Okay. Do they suffer, maybe, does a character maybe suffer from anxiety disorder, or have panic attacks, or have OCD, or suffer post-traumatic stress disorder, or maybe they have an eating disorder or delusional disorder because they're so overcome with grief? I mean, there's so many different ways that you can go with psychological disorders that just add that other touch that a lot of writers don't ever dive into. I mean, and I always figure if you're going to write a story, you freaking better just go all in, right? Like do it all. Go big or go home, and touch on the stuff that a lot of people just won't. That's what's going to make your characters jump off the page, and that's what's going to get people interested. Okay. And then finally, we're going to have layer 7, which we already talked about. We talked about dialogue. Honestly, guys, it becomes so much easier when you already have the other 6 layers figured out, because then you know that person so well, you know what they'd say and you know how they'd say it. So those are all of the layers. Pretty awesome, huh? I mean, it's crazy. There's no way that you can fully understand your characters after, I mean, there's no way you can't, I guess. There's no way you can't really fully understand who your characters are if you go through those 6 layers. And what I've shown you is the exact system that I kind of created so that I could really write in-depth characters and know that I was writing in-depth characters. And I would really love it to get the chance to help you implement everything that I just talked about. I mean, that's the goal here, right? To help you really love writing, love creating characters, and get really busy writing. So I have created the system, and I'd like to introduce you to it. It's Discovering a Character's Design, and it's 7 layers to creating characters that stick around long after the book is closed and the film is over. And in this series, I use film and literary characters to help you visualize each step of the process, and we talk about all those 7 steps. So we talk about, again, in module 1, we talk about the broad temperament types, so that you can determine who your characters really are and what motivates and excites and stifles them. In module 2, I talk about that more detailed personality type or temperament, and we apply the Myers-Briggs personalities to your characters, and we discover how they fit in the world and relate to those around them, and what a character with each personality type would look like in your story, and how they would react with the other personality types in your story. Then in module 3, we look at archetypes, and we learn more about the classics and the newest compelling archetypes and how we can use them to tell your story. And then we get on to module 4, which is a character's journey. And that is using a character's newly discovered archetype. We will uncover their journey that they should be embarking on, what makes sense for them, and what interesting obstacles are they going to need to overcome. Then in module 5, we talk about defense mechanisms. So if we're going to put our characters through negative situations, we need to know how they're going to respond and how will they overcome them. So defense mechanisms will give us some much needed direction with that. Then in module 6, for psychological disorders, I actually teach you about more than 20 psychological disorders and how they can affect your characters. And again, this is coming from my kind of former life in that counseling world. It's one of my favorite things to do. So I walk you through each personality type and tell you which type of psychological disorders they are more likely going to suffer from, if they do suffer from one. And then I also show you how to follow the breadcrumbs from the disorder to the archetype, the defense mechanism, and then finally to how all of that actually manifests itself within the character. So does it show up as pain? Does it show up as grief? Does it show up as shame? It can show up as a lot of different things. So I walk you through that. And then finally we hit module 7, which is the dialogue. And I will uncover a simple 9-step process that I use to create more compelling characters and more compelling dialogue, and make sure that the characters actually sound real. I mean, that's what we want, right? We want them to sound real. So imagine if you finally got to achieve your biggest dream of seeing your story, in print or on the big screen. I mean, that's huge. And so this program is a way to make that happen. And I want to introduce you to that program and offer it to you right now. Discovering a Character's Design. Sorry, I'm trying to switch tabs as I do this. It gives you the tools and the resources you need to immediately jump into character development, and get your character development done more quickly. You get the complete 7-part system that covers all the areas you need to equip yourself to create characters that jump off the page. So how does it work? It's really actually very simple. After you sign up and enroll in the course, you will be sent the first module and the training materials. And then each day for 7 days, or I guess 6 days after that first one, a new module is going to pop up and be delivered in your inbox. And you will also gain access to my closed Facebook writing group called Write On. And in that community, we share tips and resources, and we commiserate with each other. And then once a week, I do a Facebook Live chat where I teach something or I answer questions that people need answered. So discovering a character's design really becomes your secret weapon to achieve some clarity, some empowerment in your writing, and some confidence. And it's going to help you create those characters that stick. So of course your question is, how much does the program cost? Quite honestly, like if I was coaching you right now one-on-one and I gave you what I'm getting ready to offer, it's more than 7 hours of curriculum that you can work through at your own pace. So that would cost, I guess if you were to call me on the phone and we did it through coaching sessions, it'd be over $700. But with this program, it's $197. Okay, so you get the 7 modules for the 7 steps. You get the free 6-day story prep immersion, and then you also get the Facebook group access. But then also what I'm going to do today, if you order today, is include my 21-day beat by beat challenge and the template that goes with that. And what that system is the entire system that you're going to need to plot your entire novel or screenplay. So that's another free thing I would throw in. And usually that's $21. It's $1 per day, but you're going to get it for free if you sign up. And it's like I said, for all 3 of them, it's only $197. So the process is simple. It's painless. You get all 3 systems. So by the time you add in Discovering a Character's Design, the 6-day story prep immersion, and the 21-day beat by beat, you have every system that I use to start my story, get the foundations, create my characters, and actually get it plotted. And then all you get to do after that is you get to run and start writing. So I really encourage you to consider the system. You can see it right there. The offer's available for you I'm sorry, I was looking at the screen to make sure it's working. It's right there for you to enroll right now. So I encourage you to do that. The sooner you do it, the sooner you can get busy creating those characters. So, okay, so that is our whole process. What about that? That's pretty interesting, right? It's actually a lot of information, but it's going to help you more than you could ever imagine in your life. And it's really a great thing for you. So let's get to some of the questions. I'm trying really hard to kind of look at them and kind of see what we've got here. I'm just going to try my hardest. So I did see one earlier about asking me what I do for writer's block and how I kind of overcome writer's block. And I am really a believer that writer's block is all about, a lot of times it is all about a lack of self-esteem, or it is a feeling of being overwhelmed. And so if we can kind of deal with those 2 things, which I think these systems do, then we're really over the hump, and that really helps writer's block quite a bit. But if you have all the systems in place and the writer's block still comes, then I really would say there's a couple of things you can do. Number one, get up from your desk, go take a walk, go run, go do something physical. I'm not like a real physical person, but it does help me. I actually have a treadmill desk that I walk on as well. Another thing you can do is get out all those sticky notes and or I use index cards sometimes too, and just completely rearrange them in a way that you haven't ever seen them before. And sometimes putting those things in a different order will kind of kickstart your imagination. Okay. Another way that you can kind of beat writer's block is you pick a scene and then you say, okay, if I put this person in this situation, then what's going to happen to them? And that can kind of jumpstart that. I also have a blog post that I did one time on writer's block, and I will put that link in the Facebook group so that you guys can watch that, because I give some ideas on that. I saw another question that was asking about what genres these programs are for, these systems. I would say all genres. I mean, sci-fi, young adult, horror, any of them. This will work. Even fiction, nonfiction, screenplays, because all of those types of stories, you have to have character development. Even if it's a true story, you kind of have to have an understanding of why they're doing what they're doing. And so it really works for any of them. I saw another question about how are payments taken. I do it through a website called payfunnels.com. It handles all of that, and it takes a credit card or a debit card or PayPal or whatever. So it's all done through a secure system. So that answers that question. Let's see, what else do we have here? Looks like, okay, somebody asked about my coaching. I have a couple of different ways that you can get coaching. Like I said, I have a 20-minute free strategy session that we can arrange, and literally you just sit there and kind of tell me your story idea or what you're having issues with. I give you maybe some tips or advice, and then we talk about maybe if there's a way we can work together or if I can help you at all further down the road. I also have coaching that is just for building your platform, which, side note, if you are writing a novel and you want to traditionally publish it, if you are not also concurrently working on your platform, you're going to be way behind. Agents, publishers expect you to already have a fan base. They expect you to already have a platform before you even approach them about getting your book published. So you do not want to start trying to build a platform after you've built the book, because you won't have the book out for several years if that's what happens. So building platform, we could talk about that. It usually only takes one phone call for that, maybe sometimes two, but usually I can put you on a pretty good system for that within the first one. And then I also just have coaching that you can hire me to do coaching. You can buy 1 hour or 3 hour or 5 hour bundles. And then you use those hours however you want. If you want to call every once in a while and talk to me for 20 minutes and just get a pep talk and some encouragement, we do it that way. Or if you want to call and do 1 hour sessions, I'll do it that way. So it's really whatever kind of works for you, and whatever we kind of figure out is good for us as a team. And that's kind of what I'm there for, to help you, to encourage you, to give you new ideas, to maybe help you see things a little differently. Because I know for a fact, I mean, I have mentors, I have writing coaches, we all should. We are so close to our stories, we cannot see them objectively. And we know everything that's going to happen with our characters because we are so fully now developed, right? They are so fully developed that we don't realize when we don't connect dots, right? So we always need extra sets of eyes. That's another thing that I'll do. You can hire me just by the hour to read your manuscript and kind of give you notes on them. So that's another thing that I do when it comes to coaching. Okay, well, we've spent a lot of time here. So what I'm going to do is, there were a lot of other questions that we really don't have time. So I will kind of take the most important ones and I will answer them in an email that I'll send out to you. Since you've ordered the program, be sure you're going to be on the lookout for an email that's going to include the links to your 6-day story prep immersion, the links to your 21-day beat by beat challenge, and of course to start receiving your 7 modules every day. So be on the lookout for those. I'll answer your questions. And if you're watching the replay of this, just know you can still type comments or questions into the comment box, and I actually get emailed those. even if they're on the replay. So then if I can respond back to you on an email and hopefully get you an answer. Okay, so that's it. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope you really got something out of it. Again, go ahead, purchase that 3-part system. You will not regret it. It's only going to be available for the next 48 hours. So do it now before it gets too late. And then stay in touch with me. Join that Facebook group and let's stay in contact and let's get that story written so that you can get it out on the shelf or in the theaters. Good luck to you and write on.